Hello everyone and welcome. I'd like to first of all acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of our land, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. And again, thank the Sydney Morning Herald for continuing to partner with us to put on these terrific City Talks. And tonight we have a fabulous City Talk, and I would like to welcome our guest speakers, the Sydney Theatre Company's artistic directors, Kate Blanchett and Andrew Upton. They're of course going to be telling us about greening their historic building at Welsh Bay and about their vision for a creative and sustainable precinct. And this got booked out very early, I can tell you. Creativity is one of our city's strengths, which we must support and nurture into the future. Fostering a creative and cultural city is one of our 10 goals of Sustainable Sydney 2030, following our extensive research and our talks with city communities. We want to build on Sydney's cultural strengths, and we want to support new and emerging creative sectors. The fundamental principle of 2030 is action on global warming, and we've set ourselves the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the entire city by 70% by 2030. That's what the best available evidence tells us is needed to play our part in averting damaging climate change. It's ambitious, but it can be done if we work together to rethink the way we live and work. We don't expect to easily achieve the target. In fact, our waterfall chart, where we plotted expected results from each carbon reduction program, points to a deficit that needs to be filled by future innovation. In this challenging era of climate change, the creative impulse is our greatest ally. And as we map the dimensions of the problems confronting us, creative minds will suggest solutions, they will imagine new ways of doing things, and they will offer alternatives. Creativity can help us achieve a thriving and sustainable future, and it's no surprise that our creative communities are among some of the first and most innovative in exploring and finding new green solutions. Artists have long explored environmental themes, from the reuse of materials in new forms to cutting-edge sculpture exploring renewable energy in response to global warming. Alan Giddy's Earth versus Sky, commissioned by the city, will light waterfront fig trees at the end of Glebe Point Road in colours responding to the sky at sunset. Integral to this work is a domestic-scale wind turbine that will power the lights and help provoke wider public understanding. Last June, I welcomed to Sydney Justine Simons, the Cultural Strategic Manager for the Greater London Authority. Justine headed London's Creative Industries Environmental Program, bringing together theatre, film, music and the visual arts to work on their industry's sustainability. In one practical example Justine gave, London's theatres were throwing away around 600,000 used batteries each year. Most were batteries for radio mics, and they were replaced after every performance. Now those batteries are collected and recycled. It's not to suggest that our own creative industries are not taking action and innovating, and tonight we'll hear about the Sydney Theatre Company's work. At the Museum of Contemporary Art, the new wing under construction will incorporate sustainable design, including a seawater heat exchange with a fully integrated air conditioning system. The Opera House, the Australian National Museum and the Botanic Gardens all have strategies to reduce water and energy consumption and to encourage recycling. Metro Screen and Screen New South Wales have green screen policies to reduce environmental impacts, while an organisation known as GRASS, G-R-A-S-S, or Getting Real About Sustainable Screens, is a national initiative of the Australian Directors Guild to help reduce the carbon footprint of industry productions. Some argue that Sydney has underappreciated its creative sector, and there is more that we can do to promote our cultural life. But it's also true that there is a flourishing creativity here that daily enriches our city life. If you take the broad definition of creative industries, it includes the arts, web culture, media and publishing, film and animation, library and information services, and the design professions. By that definition, Sydney is home to 1/3 of all creative workers in Australia, although we only have 20% of the total Australian workforce. We rank first in absolute numbers and in relative share, and we have between 1/4 and 60% of all workers in areas ranging from performing arts to film, from recreational services to internet publishing, broadcasting, among others. According to UTS Research, Broadway is the epicentre of the creative industries within the city, with 20% of employment in Ultimo Piedmont, 20% in Chippendale and Redfern, and 30% in neighbouring Surrey Hills. They're all people working in the creative industries. And UTS is now home to the federal government's Creative Industries Innovation Centre, which will further strengthen that Ultimo Piedmont base, which we identified in 2030 as a central precinct to be developed as a centre of creative, media and knowledge industries. During the City Talk in 2007, Neil Armfield, in fact it was our last talk about the cultural and creative city, Neil Armfield of Belvoir Street Theatre spoke about the need to maintain, and I quote, and you might remember him saying this, we need to maintain the seedbeds of culture, the places where artists and performers can be nurtured, can work and grow. He described opportunities provided to young musos and visual artists by the Melbourne small bar scene. It was then I resolved to move a private members bill to introduce small bars into the New South Wales licensing system. And I'm pleased to report tonight, we now have 36 small bars in Sydney City, providing opportunities for our creative talent. Although an authentic culture must grow organically, there is much we can do to fertilise and stimulate that growth. This theme was repeated during our talks with you for 2030. While Sydney has world-class cultural venues, people told us there was a shortage of creative workspaces where artists and performers can experiment, can develop and can show new work. Sydney's high costs make it prohibitively expensive for artists to work in our city. Of course, our internationally recognised major cultural institutions will always depend on people, on new ideas and on new forms of expression. And we must keep affordable space and outlets for the coming generations. We've encouraged the development of Kensington Street Studios on the former CUB site at Broadway and have established other artist studios in a former council depot in Woolloomooloo. Heffron Hall in Darlinghurst is being used as a rehearsal space for the Queen Street Studios, and across the road we're converting the former Baptist Tabernacle into a 200-seat theatre, which will be used by small independent theatre companies to provide new community and cultural meeting spaces. We also want the physical planning and form of our city to foster creativity. Our laneways are now enlivened, for example, by the annual By George art projects and our practical support for small bars and one-off businesses, which are continuing to mushroom in these once-forgotten spaces. Our capital works across city villages, ranging from street upgrades to new or improved parks and extensive plantings, are building on the unique identity of each area, providing the sort of diversity and richness vital for a creative global city. Recently, we've introduced cafe tables and deck chairs into Barrack Street and Town Hall Square with free Wi-Fi. It's a trial measure that, like our festival first night, will encourage people to see and use the city in a different way, to reimagine how it could be. We want these developments allied with our $8 million grants and sponsorship program to help seed new generations of artists and creative people. The interplay of these creative forces shapes many of our major cultural events, either produced or sponsored by the city. Sydney Festival, Chinese New Year, the wonderful Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, which we celebrated just last Saturday in the parade, Sydney's Writers' Festival, Sydney Film Festival, and the Magic Biennale of Sydney. 2030 recognises that Sydney's major cultural institutions follow in a ribbon, from the Australian Museum through to the Art Gallery in the Botanic Gardens, to the Conservatorium of Music around the Opera House, onto the Museum of Contemporary Art, and from there to Walsh Bay, with the Sydney Theatre Company and the Wharf Precinct, with its theatres, its rehearsal spaces, and its arts organisations, and onto the Darling Harbour institutions and the Powerhouse Museum. We're calling this the Cultural Ribbon. What it needs is light rail running from George Street to Walsh Bay, through Barangaroo, and back to Central Railway, together with the pedestrian cycling links. Just envisage, we mightn't have an arts or theatre precinct, but just imagine going round those cultural precincts, around our magic harbour, enjoying the beautiful city and being able to stop off at those fantastic places. We will want to work with the institutions to ensure they can complement each other in this project. We also recently announced plans to promote a more diverse nighttime culture, to an extent that already exists at Walsh Bay and in pockets such as Angel Place, both with cultural centres, restaurants, bars and cafes. although you'll probably say they need to open later, and that's what we're promoting. We'd like to see bookshops, galleries, and interesting retail adding to that mix, providing a whole range of venues for people to meet and mingle before or after a show, a movie, or a concert. Institutions such as the Art Gallery of New South Wales have pioneered that trend. The gallery's been open on Wednesday evenings since 2003 with its Art After Hours program, and that's attracted 70,000 visitors. That was just last year. The Australian Museum is now following suit with its Tuesday night Jurassic Lounge featuring bands, magic, and a host of fun activities, and they're attracting enthusiastic crowds. These institutions can be an anchor for the smaller private enterprises, providing that fine-grained detail that enriches the city's identity and at the same time helps support our cultural life, while pop-up venues can showcase a variety of artists. We want to encourage innovation to transform Sydney into a lively and engaging and sustainable 21st century city. We have a wealth to draw on, including, of course, and importantly, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait communities. While the collection at the Art Gallery highlights Indigenous art, many tourists and indeed local people wonder about the absence of any formal recognition of Indigenous culture. What we want to see is a centre that will celebrate Aboriginal culture and tell the story of Aboriginal life in Sydney through an Aboriginal cultural centre. It's going to take time to realise, but when it's finished, it will remedy that glaring gap in our city's cultural life and will create a new creative hub to focus for our Aboriginal cultures. I'd just like to say in conclusion that there's a vibrant spirit that exists in Sydney, and it is one of our most precious resources because it inspires and challenges our everyday life, and it also practically pulls in tourists and investment. We need to nurture this and we need to encourage it to grow so that we can make our city bold, fun and interesting, a place to live, work and play. Sydney is home to 90,000 creative industry workers, twice the number of any other Australian city. We need to inspire and encourage ideas to protect artistic jobs, businesses and the cultural growth of our city. We believe that we can achieve these goals through partnerships, whether it's with other levels of government or our local, national and international creative communities. All these elements and participants must come together to build a vital, sustainable city that fosters innovative ways of doing things. As is now well recognised, it's not the arts or the economy, it's both. It's a vibrant, thriving arts scene, supporting a buoyant economy, and the highly educated international workforce for which global cities are competing demand livable cities with an exciting cultural life. So our task is to strengthen and deepen what Sydney already has, to promote it and to make sure that new generations of creative people can continue to make their mark in Sydney. Thank you.